Tick, tick, tick. The sound echoed through the dusty attic, steady as a heartbeat, yet somehow slower than it should be. Outside, rain slid down the windows in long, crooked lines, making the world look like it was melting. Thunder growled softly in the distance, like a sleepy lion turning over in its den. In the far corner of the attic stood a tall wooden clock. Its face was cracked and yellowed, the numbers faded like old memories. The hands moved in a strange, lazy rhythm, not quite matching the beat of time outside. Cobwebs clung to its carved frame like whispers frozen in the air. Its pendulum swung with a heavy sway, not smooth and graceful, but sluggish, as if it dragged the weight of 100 yesterdays behind it. Beneath the clock's base, the floor creaked quietly, just once like a sigh. A small puff of dust lifted into the air and danced in the slanting light. Across the room, a cardboard box of forgotten toys tipped on its side. A spinning top began to twirl without being touched. A paper plane fluttered upward, hovering in place, like it had forgotten how to fall. Downstairs, in the kitchen below, no one noticed that the rain had stopped falling, or that the hands of every other clock in the house had paused. Only the tall clock in the attic kept ticking, tick, tick, and somewhere in the walls, something ancient and clever stirred, tasting the seconds as they passed. The house on Windwhistle Lane had always been a little odd, but no one ever said it out loud. It leaned slightly to the left, as if bowing to the wind, and its roof tiles were the color of midnight, even in daylight. But what made it truly peculiar was what lived inside, or rather, what ticked inside. Leo had just turned 10 the week before. He lived with his mother and Grandpa Edwin in that old, creaky house that smelled of cinnamon and thyme. Grandpa Edwin had built toy trains that ran without tracks and carved birds that flapped their wings when no one was watching, but his most precious possession was the tall grandfather clock in the attic. No one was allowed to touch it. Ever. Grandpa called it Eldertick. Eldertick was not just any clock, he said. It was older than the house, older than Grandpa himself. It had belonged to his father, and his father's father before that. No one remembered where it came from. No one ever wound it, yet it never stopped. One rainy afternoon, when the clouds had swallowed the sun whole and the smell of old wood filled the air, Leo crept up the attic stairs. His mother was away at work, and Grandpa had fallen asleep in his armchair, a book open across his chest. Leo wasn't trying to break any rules, he just needed a quiet place to read. But the attic felt different that day, warmer somehow. The shadows curled along the edges of the boxes like sleepy cats. And Eldertick, standing tall in the far corner, ticked louder than before. Leo tried to ignore it. He opened his book and nestled beside an old trunk, but the ticking pulled at his ears like a whisper he couldn't quite hear. He glanced at the clock. Its hands had shifted again. Backward this time, only by a few minutes, but he saw it clearly. A shiver ran down his spine. Clocks didn't move backward on their own. He rose slowly and stepped closer to Eldertick. Its wood was smooth but cold, like touching ice that remembered being a tree. The carvings along its sides looked different now. Tiny symbols like stars and spirals and twisting vines. Had those always been there? The pendulum swung slower as he watched, like it was struggling. Then it stopped altogether. In that moment, the attic grew completely still. The air thickened. The light from the single bulb above flickered, and all the world felt caught in a pause. Leo's breath came out in a puff of mist. Then creak! The clock's face slid open, not like a door, but like an eye blinking wide. Inside, the gears spun in strange patterns, not golden or brass like ordinary clocks, but pale blue and glowing. The air shimmered around them, and Leo saw something that made his heart skip. Within the gears floated a silver thread. It shimmered like a spider's web in moonlight and pulsed faintly, like it was alive. As he leaned closer, he saw images flickering inside it himself, blowing out birthday candles, his mother hugging him on his first day of school, Grandpa whittling a wooden horse. It was his time, and the clock was eating it. Leo stumbled back, heart pounding. As he did, the pendulum jerked once and resumed swinging, only faster now, like it was hungry. The attic filled with the sharp, echoing tick, tick, tick that grew louder and louder. Downstairs, the living room clock began spinning wildly. The kitchen microwave blinked nonsense numbers. Even Grandpa's watch clicked in mad, jittery bursts. Leo ran down the stairs, breath ragged, but stopped cold at the foot of the steps. Grandpa Edwin was gone. His blanket lay crumpled on the chair, his slippers still in place. The book he had been reading lay open to a blank page, though Leo was certain it had been full of writing before. The ticking grew louder. Leo dashed outside. The sky was still gray, but the street looked strange. Trees stood bare, as if winter had come in minutes. A kite hung tangled in the branches, its strings snapping in the wind. The houses looked faded, drained of color. Time was slipping. Back inside, Leo ran to Grandpa's study. Old papers, photographs, and dusty journals covered the walls and shelves. He searched frantically, flipping through notebooks, trying to find something, anything about the clock. At last, behind a row of thick encyclopedias, he found a leather-bound book, brittle and cracked. On the cover, one word was carved, Keeper. Inside, Grandpa's handwriting curled in tight, careful lines. Leo read aloud in a whisper. The clock is not a machine. It is a mouth. It eats what is not used. Laughter not shared. Stories not told. Time wasted becomes time devoured. Leo's stomach turned. To stop the clock, one must feed it purpose. Fill it with meaning, or it will feed on memory, until only silence remains. He flipped further and found drawings elder-tick, but with glowing roots beneath it, tangled deep into the house's floor, and at the very back of the book, a final page. If you forget yourself, the clock will remember for you, but you will no longer be in the memory. Leo stared at the page, the ticking ringing in his ears. He had to find Grandpa. He had to fix the clock. But how? Then he remembered something. Grandpa always said that stories held power, that time listened to the tales people told, that every moment mattered more when shared. Leo ran back to the attic. Eldertick loomed larger now, its glow filling the space like moonlight underwater. He opened the face again. The silver thread still floated, thinner now, fainter. Leo placed both hands on the wood and closed his eyes. He began to speak, not with his voice, but with his heart. He remembered the time Grandpa had taught him to whistle with a blade of grass, the way they laughed when it squeaked like a duck. He remembered the picnic where ants had stolen their sandwiches, the bedtime stories with dragons and moonfolk and stars that could talk. He poured the memories into the clock, like water into a thirsty glass. The gears shimmered. He told the clock about his mother's warm hands, and the smell of her baking, about his little kitten, Whiskers, and how it used to chase shadows across the hallway, about the dream he once had of flying, and how Grandpa had carved him wooden wings. The silver thread thickened. The pendulum slowed. Outside, the trees rustled with green again. A bird chirped. The street brightened, colors returning like paint to a canvas. Then, from the corner of the attic, came a sound like wind and bells. Leo turned. Grandpa Edwin stood at the top of the stairs, blinking sleep from his eyes, as if he had just woken from a deep nap. His smile was soft and puzzled, but warm. The clock sighed, and for the first time, it stopped ticking. Just for a moment. Then it started again, quiet and calm, like a heartbeat no longer afraid. Leo didn't speak, not because he couldn't, but because something about Grandpa Edwin's return didn't feel quite finished. Grandpa smiled gently and walked slowly toward the clock, his steps careful, as though he could feel the air bending around him. His eyes, once cloudy with age, now sparkled faintly like starlight trapped in water. He touched Leo's shoulder, warm and solid, and looked up at Eldertick with a soft hum in his throat. But the clock had changed. Its face no longer showed numbers. Instead, tiny glowing symbols spun slowly where hours once were shapes Leo didn't recognize. The pendulum, though calm, had turned almost clear, like it was made of glass filled with swirling fog. The silver thread inside pulsed slowly now, and Leo could feel it inside his chest, as if the thread wasn't just his time anymore. It was theirs. Grandpa turned to Leo, still not speaking, but his gaze said everything. There was more to do. The clock wasn't finished. It had accepted the memories Leo had given, but only just. Like a lion that had paused before leaping. Something still hung in the air unfinished. Leo felt it too, a tug deep in his belly, a warning. He turned to Grandpa's book again, flipping back to the page with the glowing roots. At the very bottom, In faint ink almost hidden by time were 6 small words. The clock must choose a keeper. The attic went quiet. Even the sound of the wind outside had faded. Leo looked at Grandpa, then back at the book. Something inside him whispered that this wasn't a question, it was a test, a choice. One keeper must always remain. And the clock was waiting. Suddenly, the gears inside Eldertick began to turn again fast, sharp, grinding. The silver thread inside twisted and split, and images flared in the attic air like floating memories. Leo saw himself running through the woods, climbing trees, laughing with his mother. He saw Grandpa as a young man, sailing a paper boat down a stream. But then, darker images came, moments of fear, of loss, of things slipping away. The clock groaned. A second silver thread began to glow inside. It was thinner, fainter, and it drifted toward Grandpa. Leo understood. The clock was offering a trade. One thread could stay, the other would be taken. And suddenly, Leo knew what was happening. Eldertick had been fed. It had quieted, but not healed, not yet. It needed a keeper, not just memories. Someone to stay close, to hold time gently, to make sure it never grew hungry again. Someone who remembered. Leo took a step forward. His chest ached. He felt every second stretch and slow, as though the room had been pulled through honey. But Grandpa reached out first. He placed his hand flat against the clock. The gears stopped. The light inside it softened. The second thread pulsed gently. Leo wanted to shout, to tell him to stop, but something in Grandpa's eyes kept him still. They weren't afraid. They were kind, peaceful. Then, as if the room itself blinked, Grandpa began to glow just faintly, like moonlight through mist. He turned to Leo and rested a small carved bird in his palm, one of the ones he used to whittle in the garden. The little wings fluttered once, just once. Leo gripped it tight, and then, like a breath fading, Grandpa was gone. No sound, no flash, only a warmth in the air and the bird in Leo's hand. The attic was silent again, but Eldertick was calm. Its face now showed not symbols, but a soft golden glow. The pendulum moved with grace, balanced, measured. Not hungry anymore. Leo dropped to his knees. Tears slid down his cheeks. Not because Grandpa was lost, but because he finally understood what it meant to keep something safe. To choose love over fear. To guard a memory not just with your heart, but with your life. Time didn't belong to anyone. It was a gift, shared. And Grandpa had given his part back. The silver thread inside Eldertick pulsed softly now. A gentle rhythm, 2 threads had become one. Leo stayed in the attic for what felt like hours. Maybe it was minutes. Time was strange now. He could feel it brushing against him like wind in tall grass. He looked down at the carved bird in his palm. It felt warm, like it remembered his hand. Suddenly, the gears inside Eldertick clicked once. And the clock spoke, not with words, but with feeling. Leo felt it rush through him, a memory, not his own. A boy, younger than Leo, building a swing for his sister. A girl painting stars on her ceiling. A grandfather lighting a lantern for his grandson. Generations of memories, woven together like songs in the wind. He understood. The clock had always eaten forgotten time. Wasted time. It had fed on what people threw away, because it had no one to guide it, no one to remind it what time could be. But now, it had Leo. He was the keeper, and his time would not be wasted. The attic door creaked open behind him. His mother stood there, her face pale, eyes wide. She didn't ask questions. She simply looked around the attic, as though seeing it for the first time. Her eyes rested on the clock, then on Leo. She walked over, knelt beside him, and hugged him tightly. They sat there for a long while. The rain outside had stopped completely. The clouds had cleared, and soft golden light spilled through the attic window, warming the dust and shadows. And Eldertick ticked on, not with hunger, but with hope. The days that followed felt different, like the world had gently tilted into a softer rhythm. The old house on Windwhistle Lane still creaked, still sighed in the wind, but something within it had quieted. Beneath the floorboards, Eldertick ticked with a new kind of breath, not sharp or greedy, but patient, like a storyteller waiting for the right moment to speak. Leo returned to the attic each day after school, his feet finding the steps by heart. He no longer feared the clock, though its power still hummed faintly in the air. Now, he came with stories. He told the clock about the gingerbread cookies he and his mother had baked that weekend, how they accidentally used salt instead of sugar, and laughed until their sides hurt. He told it about his class trip to the lake, where he saw turtles sunbathing like a king on a rock. He told it about the dream he'd had the night before, where he rode a comet across the sky and waved at planets like old friends. And the clock listened. Each time he spoke, the silver thread inside Eldertick glowed brighter. It pulsed with warmth, and the air around it shimmered faintly, as if the attic itself breathed easier with each shared memory. The carved bird Grandpa had left him sat perched beside the clock now. Every so often, its wings fluttered. No one else saw it move, but Leo did. It felt like a wink from somewhere beyond time. His mother never asked too many questions. She noticed the change in Leo, the quiet strength in his voice, the way he moved with more purpose. She didn't press about Grandpa. She only once stood at the attic door and whispered, without stepping inside, that she missed her father. Leo nodded. Then, without a word, he placed a photo of Grandpa on the clock's base. The frame was old and a little cracked, but the smile in the picture was bright and full of mischief. The next morning, the entire house smelled faintly of pine wood and cinnamon. Time passed, but not in the way it once had. The clocks in the house worked again, steady, proper, ordinary. But Leo knew better now. Time wasn't about numbers or hands spinning on a face. It was about how you spent it, what you remembered, what you gave. And Eldertick, now calm and full, no longer hunted for lost minutes. It had found its keeper, and Leo had found his purpose. But the magic wasn't gone. Not fully. One afternoon, as golden light spilled across the attic floor, Leo noticed a drawer at the base of the clock, one he'd never seen before. It was carved with delicate ivy and held shut with no lock, just a tiny wooden latch. Inside, he found a notebook. Its cover was soft leather, and inside were blank pages, creamy and thick. But when Leo flipped to the middle, he found the first line, written in Grandpa's careful script. Keep what matters. Let the rest go. Each day, Leo wrote something small in the notebook. A drawing, a story, a memory. He wrote about the time he and Grandpa had gone fishing and caught nothing but seaweed and laughed anyway. He wrote about how it felt to watch his mother dance to music in the kitchen when she thought no one was looking. He even wrote about the sad days, the quiet ones, the ones that felt gray. And Eldertick ticked gently behind him, as if reading along. One evening, a strange thing happened. Leo was reading in the attic when the clock chimed, not loudly, but soft, like a breath or a bell heard through a dream. The silver thread pulsed once, and then, on the attic floor, a patch of light shimmered. He looked closer. It was a memory, but not his. In the light, he saw a girl, no older than he was, brushing her grandmother's hair. They laughed together, their voices full of love. Then the image faded, and another appeared, a boy drawing stars on the inside of a barn roof. Then another, an old man tying a ribbon around a gift for a child who hadn't arrived yet. Leo sat back, heart wide. The clock had opened. It was sharing what it had kept. Memories forgotten by others. Moments that had slipped between cracks, all offered now, like seeds in the wind. He began recording them in the notebook. He called it the Keeper's Book. And slowly, page by page, it filled with lives that might have been lost, joys remembered. Time returned. Years passed. Leo grew taller. His voice deepened. He learned to fix watches and build wooden toys just like Grandpa had. He made up stories for his younger cousins, spinning tales about moonfish and sky foxes, all the while listening for the quiet tick of Eldertick behind the attic wall. Sometimes he caught his mother sitting at the base of the attic stairs, eyes closed, as if remembering something sweet. One winter evening, during a soft snowfall, Leo climbed the stairs with a heavy heart. School had ended. He was nearly grown. The world outside had begun calling college, cities, dreams that stretched past the horizon. He stood before the clock, his hand resting gently on its frame. The silver thread glowed quietly, not demanding, just present. He whispered a promise into the wood, that no matter where he went, he would keep time with care, that he would never forget the stories that made him, that he would always come back. And the clock answered not with sound, but with warmth, pulsing through the room like a hug from long ago. Years later, after Leo had become a storyteller, known for tales that made both children and grown-ups cry and smile, a young girl came to visit the house on Windwhistle Lane. Her name was Mira. She was 8, with bright eyes and a wild imagination, and she had questions, lots of them. Leo, now older, smiled and welcomed her in. He showed her the attic. He showed her Elder Tick. She asked if the clock really ate time. He said, only the parts people forget. She asked if it was magic. He said, only if you believe memories are. Then she asked, very softly, if clocks could love people. Leo thought for a long moment. Then he nodded. Yes, he said, but only if someone loves them back. Mira began visiting every week. She brought drawings, jokes, and dreams. She spoke to the clock as if it were a friend. And one day, Elder Tick chimed again, and the floor shimmered. A new keeper had been chosen, not to replace Leo, but to continue the remembering, because time, once loved, is never really lost. And as long as stories are told, clocks like Elder Tick will keep ticking not to count what's gone, but to hold what still matters. Forever.